Harvard's Lawrence Tribe has forcefully remarked there can be no justification for halfway measures, let alone for doing nothing, while Ukraine is destroyed. Inaction is an illusion. It would represent a cowardly decision to appease and to encourage further aggression around the world. Similarly, 80 years ago, FDR warned the only limit to our realization of tomorrow will be our doubts of today. Interpreting that in the context of Russia's illegal violation of Ukraine's sovereign borders, Jeffrey Sonnenfeld argues that now is the time to act and seize Russia's $300 billion in frozen assets to support a Ukrainian victory over an imperialistic aggressor. Welcome to the Silicon Curtain podcast. If you enjoyed the material we create, please like and definitely check your subscription to make sure you are subscribed to the channel. That will help to ensure that you don't miss any of the fantastic speakers that donate their time to appear on the channel and support Ukraine. Jeffrey Sonnenfeld is Leicester Crown Professor of Leadership Practice and a Senior Associate Dean of the Yale School of Management. He helped catalyze the retreat of 1,200 global corporations from Russia, and now strongly advocates for seized Russian central bank assets to be passed to Ukraine. Sonnenfeld is known as the founder and CEO of the Chief Executive Leadership Institute, affiliated with Yale University, and for convening Yale's semi-annual CEO summits, which have drawn thousands of CEOs over the years to engage in off-the-record, peer-to-peer conversations. Jeffrey, welcome to the channel. In this very compelling article, you've said that now is the time to act on the frozen assets. Do recent battlefield reverses in Ukraine emphasize the importance of getting this measure over the line?
Yes, absolutely. This money is needed in the here and now, and not just in the dreams of the hereafter. Obviously, the rebuilding of Ukraine is more than a utopian wish. It's going to be a reality. Ukraine will get rebuilt, much the way we saw Warsaw rebuilt from sheer rubble after what the, of course, Second World War did to Warsaw. It's a great inspiration, but the rebuilding can't wait till this war ends. It has to happen now. And if there is EU reluctance to be directly funding soldiers in battle, it's bewildering, since we already are all supplying weaponry. But still, if for some reason people find it distasteful to take these seized Russian assets and convert them for military use, again, bewildering. It should be immediately put into the infrastructure needs that are tremendous. That we've seen the destruction to dams and power plants and communications towers that the World Bank estimates conservatively are $500 billion. That this 300 would get an important start right now.
And have we, and I mean we, the collective West, put Ukraine at risk of defeat through caution, indecisiveness, lack of strategic purpose, and it has to be said, possibly fear as well?
It is very frustrating, and is it's an excellent question, Jonathan. Is the just looking at the U.S. side, since I don't want to offend any European hosts and viewers, even the transfer of weapons has been too slow. That the dribs and drabs of what comes out with the Abrams tanks and with the Patriot missiles is each time Ukraine had to beg and wait for missile systems, the HIMARS that were eventually going to be delivered, but were delivered too late. Training that should have been started earlier. And a close friend of mine, who was the for half a century, who was the former United States Defense Secretary, unfortunately died young, Ash Carter, complained to me that there was a lack of urgency in the Pentagon that he used to oversee, confided in me that we're missing the sense of urgency just in the delivery of weapon systems that not only has the U.S. Congress and the allies agreed upon, but that the Pentagon was in the process of delivering. But it's been very clunky, very bureaucratic, very slow. In U.S. wartime, Ash Carter had created something called the JSOC, the Joint Strategic Operation Command, to support soldiers in the battlefield for rapid decision making, rapid support, getting them the weaponry and munitions, health, medical support, and food and things that they need, supplies in real time. And we're just seeing that the delivery is excruciatingly slow. But this financial hang up is crazy, even with the U.S. Congress coming to agreement with such a strong vote that even the Republican House Speaker, of course, he's Speaker of the whole House, but prominent Republican leader Mike Johnson showed a tremendous moment of courage and decisiveness, going back to what we saw modeled in the 1940s and 1948 by Senator Arthur Vandenberg, who was a very conservative, very right-wing Republican senator who broke ranks with his old position and pivoted. Even though he is no fan of Franklin Delano Roosevelt or Truman at that point, he came around to support the creation of NATO and was very enthusiastically gave critical support for the Marshall Plan, is that he became an internationalist. And we saw that Mike Johnson has done that and taken the Republican Party overwhelmingly with him. And of course, the Democratic Party is almost unanimously there. And yet, why is this not happening? There's a caution, an unnecessary caution by Olaf Scholz, Christine Lagarde, and some others that should not fear that somehow Europe will be punished for its necessary compliance. This shouldn't be confused with post-war retribution that happens and when we have seen those kinds of punitive payments. This is not punitive. This is compensatory and for real damage that the Russians unquestionably did and would help the people of Ukraine. It has tremendous immediate civilian payback.
And that damage is on an enormous scale. I mean, there's no total on that. Of course, the damage is still ongoing. When this topic first came up, and I think we covered it on the channel more than a year ago, the first arguments were saying, well, this is against international law, etc. And you had these arguments quoted. But you've said that Harvard professor Lawrence Tribe has comprehensively debunked the idea that these funds cannot be handed over to Ukraine because of international law and precedent.
That's exactly right. No legal scholar, despite whatever their school home is, whatever their ideology is, their political leanings, their continent or their country, has taken on and refuted this basically 200-page legal treatise that unequivocally shows there is no legal barrier. It's strictly European caution in politics. There was a little bit of fear in the U.S., mistakenly, that there could be an inflationary impact, and that perhaps is joined by the European Central Bank fear. That's wrong. That's misplaced. There's nothing inflationary that's going to follow from this whatsoever. And for that matter, that same excuse on a different topic been used for a failure to tighten sanctions more. We've done a very good but not complete job on sanctions. And if we had more time, or if you ever invite me back, we could talk in great detail about what needs to be done to close that gap. But on this front, this is absolutely critical. And the timing is of such urgency. It is Franklin Delano Roosevelt had said literally 80 years ago, the only limit to our realization of tomorrow will be our doubts of today. Is if we're going to seize the future, we have to convert this $300 billion in Russian assets now and not hold this off for some future nirvana.
And is the threat as existential as it was in the Second World War, in your view? Are we looking at a resurgent Russia, an alliance of autocracies? Could what's been termed escalation management actually accelerate the risks to the point where they're almost unstoppable, rather than, as it intends to do, seeking to try and dampen down and manage risk?
Well, as we've seen with Kherson's outskirts, the losses have been so costly in terms of human lives, but also in military momentum. morale in Russia, the devastation to Russia has been profound. The economic damage is overwhelming, despite the IMF's singular and strange rush to continually certify Putin's false numbers. The IMF has either unwittingly or conspiratorially become part of Putin's propaganda machine. Nobody on the planet shares their numbers. The World Bank doesn't share them. Barclays doesn't. The Standard Charter doesn't. Citigroup doesn't. J.P. Morgan doesn't. Somehow, the heavily discredited leader of the IMF backs Putin's numbers. She's discredited because she was driven out of the World Bank for having done this, coming out with work that distorted the economic research by their top leaders, their top researchers at the World Bank in favor of China. Wilmer Hale, a major outside law firm, was brought in by the board to investigate it. She was exited and she got a job across the street, now endorsing Putin's fake numbers. And I say they're fake numbers because Putin wakes up in the morning and invents a GDP that she certifies, and that becomes a canonized statement of fact for skeptical journalists to buy around the world. Journalists that should be skeptical about Russia, not skeptical about Ukraine or the allies, but especially since some 83 of their colleagues in Russia fell out of windowsills or off of balconies, you should, have some doubt in the credibility of what Putin is producing. But Putin has concealed since the second quarter of 2022 all the national income statistics that the IMF requires every other country except North Korea to submit to be an IMF member. And yet the volume of imports, the volume of exports, foreign direct investing, all that has been suppressed. And we know that the foreign direct investing, which is well in excess of 100 billion a year for Russia, has gone to zero. There's nobody investing. There's no underwriting of Russia's running enormous debts. Nobody, including China, is underwriting that. There's so much statistical information that has been suppressed, and the IMF economists have told us, and we actually have Zoom recordings of them with their permission, admitting that they're flying in the dark when they ever endorse Putin's propaganda. So we worry about that. When we worry, of course, on the diplomatic front, Putin is gaining no friends. On the military front, he'd been stalled out till now. But up until this moment, his only successes have been on the propaganda front. We can't let him continue to throw the lawn furniture, the living room furniture, really, into the furnace to try to keep his faltering economy going. That's what he's doing. He's mortgaging his future. They're not investing in any new technologies. They're not investing in any capital expansion. It's all just investing in more bullets. But every sector of their economy has fallen from 60 to 90%. And we've actually done that research by third-party triangulation since Russia suppressed the information.
At labor shortages, I've actually got an interview later coming up talking about labor shortages, talking about all sorts of pressures and issues. I know you're in a hurry. The last sort of area, I think, really ties in with what you've just said there. Putin has reshuffled his cabinet. This has been interpreted as some miracle solution to help fix his issues, logistical issues on the war and so on. But he's appointed a Gosplan, traditional kind of central economist. Do you think this is actually a huge mistake on his part rather than something that's going to benefit his war effort as he drives his country back to a form of war communism?
It's such a great question. We could do a whole interview just on that one because you're exactly right. It is quite nuanced. There are many layers of response to that. So at the risk of seeming superficial, I'll address a few of them, but it's such a good question. I hope you ask others that or ever invite me back for this wonderful opportunity, because first, Jonathan, it does reveal that his priority is not military strategy right now. He has no strategy. His strategy is just to hold on and hoping for Donald Trump's election for there to then lead to a weathering, some kind of a erosion of allied support for Russia should Trump get elected. That's his only strategy. And he's put somebody in place that probably has less military experience than any one of your viewers, listeners, and we have as an economist. So what does that tell you? That he's most worried about the economy. So that's a second layer. A third layer is, of all things, this is not a markets-oriented economist. This is, as people have said, Putin has taken Russia back 20 years. Well, now we've taken it back 30 years. Yes, the Goss plan, the central planning never worked for Russia. It was these 5-year plans had become a joke, and he's got somebody who still is a quaint, archaic museum-like relic of economic thought from an earlier era fused with a failed ideology. So it's pretty good news for the West that that's a person who's risen in power, and it's a terrible sign for Putin and how his economy is falling apart.
And it's something that even Russia's so-called liberal central banker probably can't fix, or it may indicate her influence is
No,
going
they
to be
can't fix,
waning.
and he probably should have been putting his organization charts together with Velcro in terms of his economic his economic leaders. The head of Rostad, he keeps tearing out people when they come close to telling the truth. Is the Russian Economic Statistics Bureau. Yeah, it's pretty devastating. There's no doubt that if Trump is not elected in November, the you could count the remaining time in the Putin administration in minutes.
US strategy at the moment, under the guidance of Sullivan, I think we have to sort of mention his importance in this, seems to be not to put too much pressure on Russia, with the realization that it could collapse, and this so-called fear that it could collapse, disastrously and violently.
It would be great if it collapsed. There's too much pressure that's going into Belarus now, as we've seen in the last few days, into Georgia, is that these nations need to have their chance to return to the democratic progress that they had in those nations, and not to mention the great danger that we have in the Balkans and everywhere else that is in the fears and the shadows of Russian aggression. So having Russia collapse is unequivocally a good thing, no matter who steps in and how divided that country can be. It's only good news. Would Chechen separatists be very difficult to manage on the world stage? That'd be a nice problem to have.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John.